I was standing on my front lawn with a satellite dish installation technician when I first saw her marching toward me like a general ready for battle. Her HOA binder clutched against her chest like a shield. The morning sun was barely up over the rooftops of Pleasant Valley Estates in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, and already this Tuesday was shaping up to be memorable for all the wrong reasons. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing?" The woman's voice cut through the morning air with the sharpness of broken glass. I turned to face her, already sensing trouble. She was maybe 50 years old, with perfectly styled blonde hair that didn't move an inch despite the October breeze, wearing a pantsuit that screamed, "I demand to speak to your manager." The technician, a guy named Carlos who had been nothing but professional for the past hour, shot me a look that said he had seen this scenario play out before. "Good morning," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I'm Oliver Finch. I just moved in last month. Are you a neighbor?" "I am Patricia Henderson, president of the Pleasant Valley Estates Homeowners Association." She said it like she was announcing royalty. "And you absolutely cannot install that satellite dish on your property." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions clearly states that no external antennas or satellite dishes are permitted without prior board approval. She opened her binder and started flipping through laminated pages, which you most certainly did not obtain. Carlos shifted his weight beside me, tool belt jangling. "Sir, I've got 3 more installations today. You want me to continue or hold off?" I looked at Patricia, then at the dish that was about 18 inches in diameter, then back at Patricia. "Look, Mrs. Henderson, I need this for work. I work from home doing data analysis for a telecommunications company, and I need reliable internet that the cable company just can't provide out here." "That is not my concern." Patricia's lips formed a thin line. "The rules exist for everyone's benefit. Satellite dishes are unsightly and decrease property values." "Actually," I said, feeling my pulse quicken with frustration, "there's a federal law that says you can't prevent me from installing this. The FCC's over-the-air reception devices rule specifically protects my right to install antennas and satellite dishes." Patricia's face flushed red. "I don't care what some federal bureaucrats think. This is a private community and we have standards. You will remove that equipment immediately, or the HOA will take legal action." Carlos cleared his throat. "Man, I really need to know what we're doing here." I took a deep breath. "Finish the installation. I'll deal with this. You are making a huge mistake, Mr. Finch." Patricia's voice rose an octave. "I will be issuing you a violation notice, and if you do not comply within 72 hours, fines will begin accruing at $50 per day. Send me whatever paperwork you want," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But that dish is staying up." Patricia spun on her heel and stormed off, her sensible pumps clicking against the sidewalk with military precision. Carlos let out a low whistle. "Been doing this job for 8 years, he said, "and that's about the 3rd worst HOA president I've seen. You sure you want to go through with this?" "Some people just take the dish down and try to work something out. I've dealt with worse than angry HOA presidents," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Let's get this finished." 2 hours later, my satellite was installed and operational. My internet speeds were exactly what I needed, and I spent the rest of the afternoon setting up my home office properly, trying not to think about the confrontation. I had moved to Pleasant Valley Estates specifically because the houses were affordable and the neighborhood was quiet. My old apartment in downtown Phoenix had been getting too expensive, and after my divorce from Michelle was finalized 6 months ago, I needed a fresh start. The violation notice arrived the next morning, slipped through my mail slot like a passive-aggressive love letter. It was printed on official HOA letterhead with a dramatic red violation stamped across the top. According to the notice, I had until Friday at 5 p.m. to remove the satellite dish or face daily fines. There was also a threat of a lien being placed on my property if the fines went unpaid. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold as I read through the notice 3 times. Then I opened my laptop and started researching. The over-the-air reception devices rule, also called the Othard Rule, had been established by the FCC back in 1996 and had been updated several times since. It clearly stated that HOAs could not enforce restrictions that impaired the installation, maintenance, or use of antennas designed to receive video programming. There were some reasonable restrictions allowed, like HOAs could dictate that dishes be installed in the least visible location possible, but they couldn't ban them outright. My dish was on my back patio, barely visible from the street. I had specifically chosen that location to be respectful of the neighborhood aesthetic. I called my younger brother Derek, who was a paralegal in Scottsdale. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cheerful. "What's up, Oliver? How's the new house?" "Getting threatened by my HOA," I said. "You know anything about FCC regulations regarding satellite dishes?" "Oh man, you're already at war with the HOA. You haven't even unpacked all your boxes yet." I could hear him typing in the background. "But yeah, I know a bit about this. The Othard Rule is pretty clear. HOAs can't ban satellite dishes that are under a certain size. What size is yours? 18 inches. You're golden then. The rule protects dishes up to 1 meter, which is like 39 inches. What's the HOA saying?" I read him the violation notice. Derek whistled low. "They're bluffing, mostly. But HOAs can be nasty even when they're wrong. They'll drag you through their internal processes, rack up legal fees, and make your life miserable. You need to respond in writing, cite the federal law, and make it clear you know your rights." "Any chance they'll just back down?" Derek laughed. "From what you told me about this Patricia lady, not likely. She sounds like the type who thinks being HOA president makes her queen of the neighborhood. But legally, you're in the right. Stand your ground." That evening, I drafted a formal response to the HOA. I kept it professional but firm, citing the specific FCC rule number, explaining that my satellite dish was within the protected size limits, and noting that it was installed in the least visible location on my property. I stated clearly that I would not be removing the dish, and that any fines levied against me would be contested as violations of federal law. I printed the letter, signed it, and drove to Patricia Henderson's house, which I had looked up in the HOA directory. She lived 4 streets over in a house that looked like it had been staged for a real estate magazine. Every shrub was perfectly trimmed, every flower in military alignment. I dropped the letter in her mailbox and drove home, feeling like I had just declared war. Friday came and went. My satellite dish remained firmly attached to my house. On Saturday morning, I found another notice, this one informing me that I was now being fined $50 per day, starting immediately. The notice also informed me that I was required to attend the next HOA board meeting on Thursday evening to address my violation. I spent the weekend researching similar cases. I found dozens of stories online about homeowners fighting HOAs over satellite dishes, and the homeowners almost always won eventually, though the process could be expensive and exhausting. I also found a template complaint letter that could be filed with the FCC if an HOA refused to comply with the Othard Rule. Monday morning, my neighbor from across the street, an older man named George who I had met briefly while moving in, knocked on my door. "Heard you're having trouble with Patricia," he said when I answered. He was probably 70, with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of years working outdoors. News travels fast. "She's been going door to door, telling everyone about the illegal satellite dish you installed." George shook his head. "Wanted to let you know that not everyone thinks you're in the wrong. I've lived here for 15 years, and Patricia has been HOA president for the last 6. She's run off 3 families with her nonsense. Run them off how? Constant harassment over minor violations. One family had their Christmas lights up 2 days past the HOA deadline, and she fined them into oblivion. They eventually just sold and left. Another family painted their front door a shade of blue that was supposedly not on the approved color list, even though it looked identical to the approved sample. Patricia made their lives hell until they repainted it, then moved away a few months later anyway. I felt my stomach sink. That's insane. That's Patricia. But here's the thing, most of us are too old or too tired to fight her. You're young, you're new, and from what I hear through the grapevine, you're not backing down. Good for you." George patted my shoulder. "I'll be at that HOA meeting Thursday. You'll need friendly faces." Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from my boss, Karen Schultz, a rare occurrence since we mostly communicated via email. "Oliver, I got a strange call this morning," she said. "Someone claiming to be from your HOA, asking if you really needed the satellite internet for work." "What?" I felt my face flush with anger. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that your employment requirements were none of their business and that they should direct any questions to our legal department." Then I hung up. "But seriously, what's going on?" I explained the situation. Karen listened quietly, then sighed. "HOAs are the worst. My sister had a similar fight in San Diego last year. She ended up having to hire a lawyer, but she won. Do you need a letter from the company stating that you require high-speed internet for your position?" "That might actually help," I said. "Thanks, Karen. I'll have HR draft something official. And Oliver, don't let them push you around. We need you, and we need you to have good internet. If this escalates, let me know and we can provide legal support." The letter arrived via email the next day. It was on company letterhead, signed by both Karen and the VP of Human Resources, stating that my position required consistent high-speed internet access, and that satellite internet was an approved solution for remote workers in areas with limited broadband infrastructure. Thursday evening arrived too quickly. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that also served as a gym and gathering space. I arrived 15 minutes early, my folder of documentation tucked under my arm. The room was set up with folding chairs facing a table where Patricia and 4 other board members sat like judges at a tribunal. Patricia's eyes locked onto me the moment I walked in. She said something to the woman sitting next to her, a thin, nervous-looking lady who kept glancing at me and then away. About 20 other residents filtered in over the next 10 minutes. I recognized George, who gave me an encouraging nod. Most of the others were older couples who looked like they were attending out of obligation rather than interest. Patricia called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. She went through standard business first: approval of last meeting's minutes, discussion of landscaping contracts, debate over whether the community center needed new equipment. It was all painfully boring, and I could feel the tension building in my chest as I waited for my item to come up. Finally, 45 minutes into the meeting, Patricia cleared her throat dramatically. "Now we come to new business. We have a serious violation to address. Mr. Oliver Finch has, despite clear HOA regulations and formal notice, refused to remove an unauthorized satellite dish from his property. She looked directly at me. "Mr. Finch, would you like to explain why you believe you're above the community rules?" I stood, my folder in hand. "I don't believe I'm above the rules. I believe the HOA's rules are superseded by federal law in this case." "There is no federal law that gives you the right to violate our covenants," Patricia shot back. "Actually, there is." I opened my folder and pulled out printed copies of the FCC rule. The FCC's Over-the-Air Reception Devices Rule, adopted in 1996 and codified in 47 CFR. Section 1.4000 specifically prohibits restrictions that impair the installation, maintenance, or use of antennas, including direct-to-home satellite dishes. My dish is 18 inches in diameter, well under the protected size of 1 meter. It's installed on my private property, on my back patio where it's minimally visible from the street. The HOA cannot legally require me to remove it. One of the other board members, a man in his 60s with gray hair, spoke up. "I'm not familiar with this rule." "Patricia, did we research this before issuing the violation?" Patricia's face flushed. "The federal government has no business telling private communities how to manage their property. Our CCRs were filed legally, and they prohibit satellite dishes. End of discussion." "It's not end of discussion," I said, keeping my voice level. "Federal law supersedes HOA covenants. I have multiple court cases here where HOAs were not only forced to allow satellite dishes, but were also ordered to pay homeowners legal fees for bringing improper actions." I pulled out more papers. "I also have a letter from my employer stating that I require high-speed internet for my job, which the local cable company cannot reliably provide." George stood up from his seat. "I think Oliver has a point. We can't just ignore federal law because we don't like it." "Sit down, George," Patricia snapped. "This doesn't concern you. I'm a homeowner here. Everything the HOA does concerns me." George remained standing. "How much is this going to cost us in legal fees if we pursue this and lose?" The nervous woman next to Patricia spoke up quietly. "We should probably consult with the HOA's attorney before proceeding." "We don't need an attorney to tell us what our own rules say," Patricia said. "The violation stands. Mr. Finch, you will remove the satellite dish, or fines will continue to accrue. You now owe $350. "I'm not paying those fines," I said. "And if the HOA attempts to place a lien on my property or takes any other action, I'll be filing a complaint with the FCC and pursuing legal action for harassment and violation of federal law." The room erupted in murmurs. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly. "This meeting is not a debate. The board has made its decision. Mr. Finch, you are dismissed." "I'd like this entered into the official meeting minutes," I said loudly. The HOA was informed of the FCC's OTARD rule and chose to proceed with enforcement actions, despite being in violation of federal law. I will not be removing my satellite dish, and I will not be paying any fines related to this violation. I walked out of the community center with my heart pounding. George followed me outside. "That went about as well as expected," he said. "Patricia is not going to let this go." "Neither am I," said. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the FCC. The online form was straightforward, asking for details about the HOA's restrictions and actions. I attached copies of all the violation notices, my response letters, and notes from the meeting. The FCC website stated that complaints were typically reviewed within a few weeks, and that they would contact both parties. Days turned into weeks. The violation notices kept coming, each one adding another $50 to my supposed debt. I kept every single notice in a growing folder, documenting everything. The total quickly climbed past $1,000, Patricia's harassment escalated in petty ways. I received a violation notice for leaving my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup, even though I had brought them in the same evening as collection, just like everyone else. I got another notice claiming my lawn was a quarter-inch too tall, despite having just mowed it. Each notice came with threats of additional fines. I started documenting everything. I took time-stamped photos of my trash cans, my lawn, my satellite dish. I kept a log of every interaction with the HOA. When Patricia drove slowly past my house multiple times a day, I noted it. When she knocked on my door to discuss the satellite dish, and I declined to speak with her without written communication, I documented that too. 3 weeks after filing my FCC complaint, I received a letter from a law firm representing the HOA. The letter stated that I was in breach of the community's CCRs, and that if I did not remove the satellite dish and pay the accumulated fines, now totaling over $2,000, the HOA would begin the process of placing a lien on my property. I called Derek immediately. "You need a lawyer," he said after I read him the letter. "This is beyond HOA nonsense now. They're threatening your property. I can give you some names of attorneys who specialize in HOA disputes." "This is getting expensive," I said. The truth was, my divorce had cleaned me out financially. I had enough for my mortgage and bills, but adding legal fees on top was going to hurt. The good news is, if you win, and you will win, they'll likely have to pay your legal fees. Courts don't look kindly on HOAs that ignore federal law. Derek connected me with an attorney named Robert Chen, who practiced in Phoenix and had handled several HOA cases. Robert agreed to a consultation for free, and we met at his office the following Tuesday. Robert was in his 40s, sharp-eyed and methodical. He listened to my entire story, reviewed all my documentation, and then leaned back in his chair. "This is pretty straightforward," he said. "The HOA is clearly in violation of the Odd-Hard rule. The fact that they're continuing to pursue this after being informed of federal law is actually good for you because it shows bad faith. The accumulated fines are unenforceable. The threat of a lien is probably unenforceable too, though we'd want to move quickly to prevent them from actually filing one." "What's the process?" I asked. "We send them a cease and desist letter, very formal, laying out the federal law and demanding they rescind all fines and violations. If they ignore that, which they probably will given what you've told me, we file suit. We'd likely file in federal court given that this involves a federal regulation. We sue for declaratory judgment stating you have the right to maintain the satellite dish, injunctive relief preventing them from further harassment, and attorney's fees. How long does that take? Could be anywhere from 6 months to a year, depending on how stubborn they are. But I've seen HOAs fold as soon as federal court papers are filed. Legal fees add up fast, and HOA board members can be held personally liable if they're acting in bad faith. What are we looking at for costs?" Robert quoted me a retainer that made my stomach drop, though he also explained his fee structure and reassured me that we would be pursuing full recovery of fees from the HOA. I left his office feeling both relieved and anxious. That evening, I sat in my home office, looking at my bank account and trying to make the numbers work. My satellite internet was running perfectly. My work was going great, but this fight was consuming more energy and resources than I had anticipated. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize with a Phoenix area code. "Is this Oliver Finch?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Republic." I've been covering HOA disputes in the Phoenix area, and I received a tip about your situation with Pleasant Valley Estates. Would you be willing to talk to me? I hesitated. How did you get my number? Public records. Your property is listed in the HOA directory. I've also been reviewing FCC complaints filed in the region. Your case came up. Look, I know this is intrusive, but HOA overreach is a serious issue that affects thousands of Arizona residents. Your story could help other people understand their rights. I'm not sure publicity is going to help me right now, I said. I'm already on the HOA's bad side. Think about it this way. HOAs hate bad publicity. If your story gets out there, the board members might face pressure from other residents to drop this. I've seen it happen before. I thought about George and his comment about Patricia running off other families. Can I think about it? Of course. I'll email you my contact information. No pressure. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to keep this private, handle it through legal channels quietly. But another part of me was angry. Angry at Patricia's bullying. Angry at the waste of time and money. Angry at the principle of an HOA thinking it could ignore federal law. I called Robert Chen back. What do you think about media coverage? I asked after explaining the reporter's call. It can be a double-edged sword, Robert said. On one hand, it might pressure the HOA to back down. On the other hand, it might make them dig in deeper out of pride. But honestly, in this case, I think it could help. The law is completely on your side, and the more people who know about Othard, the better. Just be careful what you say. Stick to facts, don't get emotional or make personal attacks. I called Jennifer Morrison back the next day and agreed to an interview. We met at a coffee shop in Central Phoenix, and I walked her through everything from the initial installation to the threats of liens. She took notes, asked insightful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in the broader implications. This happens all the time, she said. HOAs create these blanket rules without understanding the legal limitations. Satellite dishes, solar panels, political signs, there's a lot of federal and state law that supersedes HOA covenants. But most homeowners don't know their rights, so they just comply. I almost did, I admitted. If it wasn't essential for my work, I might have just taken it down to avoid the hassle. That's exactly what they count on. HOAs have become incredibly powerful in Arizona. About 60% of new homes in the Phoenix area are in HOA communities. These organizations control where people live, how they maintain their property, even what color they can paint their front door. And most HOA board members have no legal training. They just enforce rules without questioning whether those rules are even valid. The article ran the following Sunday, front page of the local section. Jennifer had done an excellent job, laying out the facts clearly and including comments from an FCC spokesperson confirming the Othard rule's applicability. She had also reached out to the Pleasant Valley Estates HOA for comment. Patricia's response was quoted, "We have a duty to all residents to maintain property values and aesthetic standards. Individual preferences cannot override community agreements." The article included a photo of my house with the satellite dish visible, and a sidebar explaining the FCC rule and how homeowners could file complaints if their HOAs were violating it. My phone started ringing within hours of the article's publication. Neighbors I had never met called to offer support. 2 other residents of Pleasant Valley Estates contacted me to say they had similar issues with the HOA over different matters. A man from a neighboring HOA community asked if he could use my story to fight his own satellite dish battle. George stopped by that afternoon with a 6-pack of beer and a grin. "You've caused quite the stir," he said as we sat on my back patio, the offending satellite dish mounted just above us. The community Facebook group is going crazy. About half the people think you're a hero, the other half think you're destroying the neighborhood. Great, I said, taking a long drink. What about Patricia? Oh, she's furious. Posted a long rant about fake news and how the media always sides against HOAs. But here's the interesting part. 2 board members resigned this morning. I nearly choked on my beer. What? The nervous lady who sits next to Patricia. Her name's Linda. She posted a resignation letter saying she didn't sign up to violate federal law and that the board should have consulted an attorney before pursuing this. And one of the other members, a guy named Tom, he resigned too with a similar statement. That leaves Patricia and 2 others, and they don't have a quorum anymore to make official decisions. So what happens now? Emergency election, I think. They need at least 5 board members to function. This could get messy. It got messy. Patricia tried to continue issuing violations and fines despite not having a functioning board. I received another notice adding $50 per day to my total, which was now approaching $3,000. Robert Chen sent the cease and desist letter, which Patricia apparently ignored. Then the FCC responded to my complaint. I received a letter stating that they had reviewed my case and determined that the Pleasant Valley Estates HOA's restrictions were in violation of the OTARD rule. The letter included instructions for the HOA to immediately cease enforcement actions and remove any fines or penalties related to the satellite dish. A copy had been sent to the HOA's registered agent. I felt a surge of vindication reading the letter. Federal regulators had confirmed what I had been saying all along. I scanned the letter and emailed it to every address I had for the HOA board members. Patricia's response came via certified mail 2 days later. The letter, on HOA letterhead but signed only by her, stated that the FCC had no jurisdiction over private property covenants and that the violation remained in effect. "She's lost her mind," Robert said when I showed him the letter. "This is actually perfect for us. She's openly defying a federal agency. We file suit now, and we include this letter as evidence of bad faith and willful violation of federal law." The lawsuit was filed in United States District Court for the District of Arizona 3 weeks after the FCC's determination letter. Robert filed for declaratory judgment, injunctive relief, and attorney's fees. The complaint laid out the entire timeline, included all the documentation, and cited not only the OTARD rule but also multiple cases where courts had ruled in favor of homeowners in similar situations. I was served papers, of course, since I was the plaintiff, but Patricia and the other 2 remaining board members were also served as representatives of the HOA. I wasn't there to see Patricia's reaction, but George told me she had a meltdown at the community center when the process server found her there. She was screaming about frivolous lawsuits and harassment, George reported. The process server apparently had to tell her multiple times that he was just doing his job. It was quite the scene. The HOA emergency election happened in the midst of all this. George ran for a board position, as did 3 other residents who were tired of Patricia's leadership. Patricia ran for re-election as president. The election was contentious, with accusations flying back and forth on social media and at community gatherings. When the votes were counted, Patricia lost. She wasn't just voted out as president, she lost her board seat entirely. George and the other reformist candidates won in what George described as a landslide. The new board's first action was to hire an attorney to review the lawsuit and provide recommendations. The attorney they hired, a woman named Sandra Phillips who specialized in HOA law, took one look at the case and reportedly told the board that Pleasant Valley Estates had no chance of winning. She recommended immediate settlement, removal of all fines and violations, and an update to the HOA's CCRs to bring them into compliance with federal law. Patricia showed up to the board meeting where this was discussed. I wasn't there, but George told me about it later. Apparently, Patricia stood up during public comment and launched into a 20-minute tirade about how the new board was destroying the community, how property values would plummet if satellite dishes were allowed, and how I was a troublemaker who should be forced to move. It was uncomfortable, George said. She was actually shaking with anger. Sandra, the attorney, tried to explain the legal situation, but Patricia kept interrupting. Finally, the new board president, a nice lady named Carol, had to have Patricia's microphone turned off. She stormed out after that. The settlement offer came through Robert Chen's office a week later. The HOA agreed to withdraw all violations related to my satellite dish, rescind all fines, acknowledge my right to maintain the dish under federal law, and pay my attorney's fees up to a reasonable amount. In exchange, I would dismiss the lawsuit with prejudice. This is a good offer, Robert said. It's everything we wanted. They're admitting they were wrong without us having to go through months of litigation. What about Patricia? I asked. Does she face any consequences? Not legally, no. She was acting in her capacity as HOA president, so she has some protection. The new board could potentially sue her for mismanagement or for acting against the HOA's interests, but that's up to them. I accepted the settlement. The lawsuit was dismissed within 2 weeks. My satellite dish remained exactly where it was, functioning perfectly. The total amount the HOA paid for my attorney's fees was just over $8,000, which was apparently paid out of the HOA's reserve fund, meaning all the residents effectively paid for Patricia's stubbornness. The story didn't end there, though. About a month after the settlement was finalized, I received a call from Sandra Phillips, the HOA's attorney. "Mr. Finch, I hope you don't mind me calling directly," she said. "I wanted to let you know about something that's developed. The board has been reviewing HOA finances as part of their new oversight process, and they've discovered some irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "It appears that Mrs. Henderson may have been using HOA funds for personal expenses. The board is conducting a full audit, and they've asked me to inform you because some of the questionable expenses relate to her campaign against you. She apparently hired a private investigator to look into your background, paid for with HOA money." I felt my blood run cold. She hired a private investigator. Yes, the invoices show about $3,000 paid to a local PI firm. There's no legitimate HOA business reason for this expense. The board is considering criminal charges for embezzlement and misuse of HOA funds. That's insane. It gets worse. The audit has uncovered about $15,000 in questionable expenses over the past 2 years. Dinners she claimed were board meetings but had no other attendees listed. Car services she claimed were for HOA business but were to personal locations. The board is involving law enforcement. 2 weeks later, I heard through George that the Phoenix Police Department's white-collar crime unit had opened an investigation into Patricia Henderson and the Pleasant Valley Estates HOA finances. Detectives interviewed board members, reviewed financial records, and apparently interviewed Patricia herself. I was interviewed too, which was surreal. A detective came to my house and asked me about my interactions with Patricia, the timeline of the satellite dish dispute, and whether I had any knowledge of HOA finances. I told him everything I knew, which wasn't much beyond my own experience. "Did you know she hired a private investigator to look into you?" the detective asked. "The HOA attorney told me recently, but no, I had no idea at the time." "Did Mrs. Henderson ever indicate she had information about your personal life? Your divorce, your employment history, anything like that?" I thought back. She did make a comment once, during one of the times she came to my door, about how I should be more concerned with getting my personal life in order than fighting with the HOA. At the time, I thought she was just being generally mean. The detective nodded and made notes. "We're building a case for embezzlement and identity theft. She used HOA resources to conduct unauthorized background checks on several residents, including you. That's potentially criminal depending on what information was accessed and how. The investigation took months. During that time, life in Pleasant Valley Estates actually improved dramatically. The new board under George's leadership updated the community's CCRs to comply with federal and state law, established better financial oversight, and generally made the HOA feel less like a dictatorship and more like a community organization. I got to know my neighbors better. The two other residents who had contacted me after the news article became friends. We'd occasionally have barbecues where we joked about our war stories with the HOA. My work continued going great, with my satellite internet performing flawlessly. Patricia, meanwhile, became increasingly isolated. She stopped attending board meetings and community events. Her house went up for sale 4 months after the investigation started. George told me she was apparently moving back east to live with family. The criminal charges came down in late spring. Patricia Henderson was charged with 3 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of misuse of HOA funds, and 1 count of unlawful use of personal information. The amounts involved were relatively small by white-collar crime standards, but the DA's office apparently decided to pursue charges to send a message about HOA accountability. I followed the case through local news coverage. Patricia's attorney argued that she had acted in good faith to protect the community, that any questionable expenses were mistakes rather than intentional theft, and that she was being unfairly targeted. The prosecution argued that she had systematically abused her position for personal benefit and to harass homeowners she disagreed with. The case went to trial in August, about 10 months after my initial conflict with Patricia over the satellite dish. I was called as a witness, which meant I had to take a day off work and spend several hours in court. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, and Patricia looked diminished somehow, sitting next to her attorney in a conservative dress that was a far cry from the power suits she used to wear to HOA meetings. The prosecutor asked me to describe my interactions with Patricia, particularly around the satellite dish dispute. I walked through the timeline, keeping my answers factual and unemotional. Patricia's attorney tried to suggest on cross-examination that I had been unreasonably combative, that I could have worked with the HOA to find a compromise. The compromise would have been me violating federal law, I said. I was never going to agree to that. The trial lasted 3 days. Other homeowners testified about their experiences with Patricia. The PI she had hired testified that she had specifically asked him to find dirt on me and several other residents. Financial experts walked through the audit findings, showing a pattern of personal expenses charged to the HOA. The jury deliberated for about 6 hours before returning a verdict: guilty on 2 counts of embezzlement, guilty on both counts of misuse of HOA funds, not guilty on the unlawful use of personal information charge. The judge scheduled sentencing for a month later. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing, but I read about it online. Patricia Henderson was sentenced to 18 months in jail, though the sentence was suspended to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and full restitution to the HOA for all misappropriated funds, plus the legal fees from my case. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for 10 years. It felt like overkill in some ways, all of this stemming from a fight over a satellite dish. But as I sat on my back patio that evening, looking up at the dish that had caused so much trouble, I realized it had never really been about the satellite dish at all. It had been about power, control, and someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her, even when federal law said otherwise. My phone rang. It was Derek. Saw the news about the sentencing, he said. You started quite the saga with that satellite dish installation. I just wanted internet for work, I said. I didn't set out to take down an HOA president. But you did. And honestly, she took herself down. You just stood up for your rights. Derek paused. How are you feeling about all this? Tired, I admitted. Relieved it's over, still kind of amazed at how out of control it got. At least your internet works great, right? I laughed. Yeah, the internet works great. After we hung up, I stayed outside for a while, enjoying the warm Arizona evening. My phone buzzed with a text from George. Board meeting tomorrow night, 7 p.m. We're voting on a memorial plaque about federal law superseding HOA covenants. Thought you'd appreciate the irony. I smiled and texted back. I'll be there. The next evening, I walked to the community center for the board meeting. It was the first one I had attended since the disastrous meeting where Patricia had tried to intimidate me into submission. The atmosphere was completely different now. Carol, the board president, ran things efficiently but warmly. Residents actually seemed engaged rather than scared. When they got to the discussion about updating community information, George stood up. I want to propose that we create an educational campaign for residents about federal and state laws that affect HOA governance. A lot of people don't know about the Othard Rule, or the Arizona Solar Rights Act, or federal fair housing laws. We should be empowering our residents with information, not trying to enforce rules that aren't even legal. The motion passed unanimously. Carol asked if I would be willing to help draft an information sheet about the Othard Rule, given my experience. I agreed. Walking home that night, I thought about how different everything felt. The neighborhood was the same physically, the houses and streets unchanged, but the entire culture had shifted. People waved to each other, stopped to chat, seemed less afraid of making minor violations that would bring down HOA wrath. About a week later, I was working in my home office when my doorbell rang. I expected it to be a delivery, but instead found a woman in her 30s standing on my doorstep, looking nervous. "Are you Oliver Finch?" she asked. "Yes. Can I help you? My name is Rachel Foster. I live in a different HOA community over in Temp. I read about your case with the satellite dish, and I'm dealing with something similar with solar panels. My HOA is saying I can't install them, but I've read about the Arizona Solar Rights Act, and I think they're wrong. I was wondering if you could give me some advice, maybe connect me with your attorney." I invited her in and spent an hour walking her through my experience, sharing the lessons I had learned about documentation, knowing your rights and standing firm when you're in the right. I gave her Robert Chen's contact information and copies of some of the research materials I had compiled. After Rachel left, I realized that my fight with Patricia and the Pleasant Valley Estates HOA had become something larger than just my own situation. It had opened up conversations about HOA overreach, helped other people understand their rights, and led to real criminal accountability for someone who had abused their position. Over the following months, I heard from several other homeowners dealing with HOA disputes over everything from satellite dishes to solar panels to political yard signs. Some just wanted advice, others wanted attorney referrals. I helped where I could, always emphasizing the importance of knowing your rights and documenting everything. The information sheet about the Othard rule that I helped create was posted in the Pleasant Valley Estates Community Center and mailed to every resident. Several people thanked me for it, including a few who admitted they had taken down satellite dishes years ago because they didn't know they had the right to keep them. George became one of my closest friends. We'd have dinner together every couple of weeks, usually at his place or mine, talking about neighborhood gossip and life in general. He told me stories about the old days of the HOA, before Patricia's reign of terror, when it had actually functioned as a helpful community organization rather than an authoritarian regime. "You changed this place," he told me one evening as we sat on his porch watching the sunset. "I know it probably doesn't feel like it because of how much hassle it caused you, but you really did. People aren't afraid anymore. They ask questions, they stand up for themselves. That's because you showed them it was possible." "I just wanted to watch Netflix and work from home," I said, but I appreciated his words. My ex-wife Michelle called me out of the blue one day. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, not since the divorce was finalized. "I saw your name in the news," she said. "Something about an HOA fight." "That was months ago," I said, surprised she had kept tabs on me at all. "It's all settled now." "I just wanted to say good job. You always were stubborn about doing the right thing, even when it cost you. It's one of the things I admired about you." It was one of the strangest and nicest conversations we had had in years. We didn't talk long, but we ended on good terms, both of us having moved forward with our lives. As autumn rolled around again, almost a full year after I had first installed my satellite dish, the Pleasant Valley Estates HOA held its annual meeting. The community had grown in that year, new families moving in attracted by the reformed HOA's more reasonable approach. Property values had actually increased, contrary to Patricia's dire predictions about satellite dishes destroying the neighborhood. During the meeting, Carol gave a state of the community address. She talked about improved finances, better communication, and a new focus on building community rather than enforcing minutiae. Then she said something that surprised me. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone who inadvertently helped us become a better community." Oliver Finch stood up for his rights when it would have been easier to back down. In doing so, he exposed serious problems in our governance and finances. While the situation was difficult and contentious, it led to necessary changes. "So thank you, Oliver, for your stubbornness." Everyone applauded. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and pride. After the meeting, several people came up to shake my hand or thank me for standing my ground. Late that night, I sat in my home office, the same office where this had all started. My satellite dish was working perfectly, as it had every day since installation. On my wall, I had framed the FCC determination letter, not out of spite but as a reminder that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's difficult. My phone buzzed with an email from Robert Chen. Another potential client, another HOA dispute, another person who needed help understanding their rights. I forwarded the email to the information I had compiled about finding representation and knowing your rights, along with a personal note encouraging them to stand firm. I had moved to Pleasant Valley Estates looking for a quiet place to rebuild my life after divorce. Instead, I had stumbled into a legal battle that had consumed months of my life, cost thousands of dollars, and ultimately brought down a corrupt HOA president. It hadn't been what I planned, but looking back, I wouldn't change it. The satellite dish remained on my patio, a small 18-inch reminder that sometimes the most mundane things, the simple desire for good internet, can become catalysts for real change. Federal law had protected my right to install it, but I had to be willing to fight for that right. Not everyone would have made the same choice. Many would have backed down, removed the dish, avoided the conflict. But someone had to stand up. Someone had to say no to unreasonable authority. Someone had to prove that HOA covenants, no matter how official they looked, couldn't override federal law. This time, that someone had been me. As I finally shut down my computer and headed to bed, I glanced out my back window at the satellite dish, illuminated by my porch light. Tomorrow, I would use it to work from home, to stream entertainment, to live my life exactly as I had intended when I first moved here. And that, ultimately, was what the whole fight had been about. The right to live peacefully in my own home, making choices that harmed no one and were protected by law. Pleasant Valley Estates had become pleasant again, just not in the way Patricia Henderson had envisioned. It was pleasant because people felt respected, because the HOA served the community instead of controlling it, because someone had finally drawn a line and said enough is enough. That line had been drawn over a satellite dish of all things, but it had mattered nonetheless. The story spread beyond just my neighborhood. Jennifer Morrison did a follow-up article about HOA reform in Arizona, using my case as a centerpiece. Other communities started questioning their own HOA practices. The state legislature even introduced a bill to increase HOA oversight and accountability, though whether it would pass was anyone's guess. I never sought to be a symbol or a catalyst for change. I just wanted reliable internet. But life has a funny way of taking simple situations and expanding them into something significant. A satellite dish became a federal case, became a criminal investigation, became a community transformation. Each step felt surreal as it happened, and even now, settled and peaceful in my home, it sometimes felt like it had all happened to someone else. But it had happened to me. I had the legal documents, the news clippings, the memories of stress and anger and eventual vindication to prove it. And I had my satellite dish, still mounted to my patio, still functioning perfectly, still a completely legal and protected installation under federal law. That was what mattered in the end. Not the drama, not the conflict, not even the satisfaction of being proven right. What mattered was that my home was mine, my choices were mine, and no HOA president, no matter how determined, could take that away as long as I knew my rights and was willing to stand up for them. Pleasant Valley Estates lived up to its name now, and I was proud to be part of that community. The fight was over, the wounds had healed and life went on, one satellite transmission at a time.